Hello and welcome to another lesson, this time in prohibited substances. So here we're looking at drugs in sport. Reminder in regards to these presentations, the yellow text boxes are for the tasks for students, the green text boxes are the note-taking sections for students, the blue text boxes are differentiation tasks, and the red text boxes are the teaching and learning strategies and ideas for the practitioners. So this topic, what does the syllabus ask us to know in regards to this topic? So we need to be able to understand the different types of drugs in sport, the different prohibited substances that occur and exist in sports, and what some of those effects are in terms of performance and also in regards to health risks. So that relates to then the positive and negative impacts and effects of this and these types of drugs, and ultimately being able to apply the different types of sportsmen or women who might decide to take performance enhancing drugs. Okay, so identify which sports benefit from which type of drug. So first and foremost, let's look at this term ergogenic aids and doping. So ultimately, when we think about ergogenic aids, we're talking about any technique or substance that's taken for the purpose of enhancing sporting performance. So ergogenic aids can be legal. Okay, so we can think of different examples of where it is appropriate to try and improve technique through some sort of substance. So it could be, for example, a sports energy drink might provide us with hydration and also more energy. When we look at the term doping, this is an example of a banned or illegal technique or substance to improve performance. So these are things that an athlete might take or do which are not permitted, are illegal. And ultimately, performance enhancing drugs, and we're going to call them PEDs from now on, basically they're banned by the national governing bodies, okay, so the NGBs, and also by the International Olympic Committee, okay, and that will be through also the World Anti-Doping Agency, so WADA. Okay, ultimately a national governing body is an organisation which is responsible for managing specific sports. So if we think of the RFU, the Rugby Federation Union, or the FA, the Football Association, okay, we've got examples there of where they set the rules, but they'll also be talking and thinking about obviously drug taking and what some of the illegal methods are in terms of doping. So let's look at the different types of drugs that you need to know about in the syllabus. So first and foremost, we've got stimulants. Okay, this is the idea of a substance which basically speeds up our brain and our body ultimately. Okay, and within our body we can have a release of a hormone such as adrenaline, and this comes naturally to us in terms of being a natural stimulant of the body. Okay, but we've got different examples of stimulants, okay, that are illegal, and ultimately they can increase the alertness, they can also reduce reaction time, ultimately they can reduce tiredness, and they can increase aggressiveness. Okay, so caffeine, for example, is a type of stimulant, okay, and things like cocaine and ecstasy in terms of recreational drugs are as well. Caffeine, however, since 2004 has actually been allowed for athletes to take. So that has kind of changed in terms of the banned list since 2004. So it's now allowed to be taken by sporting athletes. Just want you to pause the video here. So what type of sports and athletes in particular might require stimulants to enhance their performance? Just pause the video here, see if you can answer that. And the second question, think about what are some of the health risks associated with stimulants. Again, just pause the video here, see if you can write any ideas down. Okay, so one clear example in terms of stimulants are performers that require a high level of reaction time. So that could be sprinters, for example, at the start of a 100-meter race, or any athlete for that matter that's on the track. Some of the side effects that you may have mentioned include things like high blood pressure, an increased chance of stroke, heart and liver problems, as well as obviously an increase in the risk of injury because our tolerance ultimately is higher. Okay, so let's move on to narcotic analgesics. Okay, and these basically refer to aspects of being painkillers. Okay, so they mask the injury, they mask fatigue, okay, and ultimately they can make injury worse. So heroin there, as you can see, is an example of one of these narcotics, okay, and ultimately so is morphine, which you might find being used within hospital. Okay, the problem with them is that they're obviously highly addictive, can cause withdrawal symptoms, and ultimately we take them to recover from excessive overtraining. Okay, so obviously we might experience DOMS after training, so delayed onset muscle soreness, but things like these type of drugs, these narcotics, will actually reduce that pain. Again, pause your video here so you can come up with examples of different sporting athletes that might require this. And ultimately, what are the health risks associated? Okay, so different examples you may have come up with. Any sporting athlete, ultimately, that's working hard and overtraining, perhaps, okay, will require to try and mask an injury or mask fatigue. Okay, so you could have put down any kind of sporting athlete really in regards to this. Someone that actually has maybe an injury and they're trying to maybe recover from it quickly, or at least mask the pain so that they can play through it. Side effects include that can obviously cause constipation, it can lower blood pressure, and there is a loss of concentration, which can potentially lead to coma. All right, let's look at anabolic agents next. Okay, so here we're talking about a drug which helps the athlete train harder and build muscle mass quicker. Okay, so ultimately, if we're speeding up that recovery, okay, we can train harder for longer. So if we have two athletes, okay, and one's training on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday, and the Tuesday and the Thursday, for example, they're recovering, okay, with taking this anabolic agent, okay, we can actually, with the second athlete, okay, train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, okay, and ultimately we can train harder as well. So again, we're getting that competitive advantage compared to the first athlete. Examples, the main example that you'll find in the sporting sphere is things like anabolic steroids. So again, pause the video here, see if you can come up with any ideas of which sporting athletes and sports in particular might require anabolic agents. Again, also associate and think about what are the health risks with taking these anabolic agents. Okay, so clear examples here again are sprinters, okay, who require that high muscle mass. They need that power, that acceleration as they come out of the blocks. Okay, so anabolic steroids, there's plenty of examples of 100-meter sprinters that have taken anabolic steroids, whether it be Ben Johnson in 1988 in terms of the Olympics, okay, and then more recently people like Justin Gatlin, Asafa Powell caught taking anabolic steroids. Side effects obviously include things like becoming more aggressive and more competitive. We have for men, shrinking of testicles. In women, okay, we may have an increase of things like body hair, deepening of the voice, and smaller breasts. And ultimately, it also increases our blood pressure. Okay, anabolic agents can also damage vital organs such as liver, kidneys, and the heart. All right, let's move on to peptide hormones next. So here we're looking at the fact that a peptide hormone actually is a natural occurring substance. And ultimately what it does is it improves muscle growth and production of red blood cells. Okay, and we know that red blood cells obviously have a vital part to play in bringing that oxygen to the working muscles. So EPO is an example of a peptide hormone. And the problem we have with peptide hormones is that because it's naturally occurring, it's more difficult to detect when an athlete is, for example, cheating with this. Ultimately, as it says there, it delivers obviously the oxygen to the working muscles and that ability to increase energy and also reduce fatigue. Again, pause your video here. What sporting athletes are going to require the use of EPO in their performance? And what are also the health risks associated with this? Okay, so examples include, for example, Lance Armstrong, okay, admitted to taking EPO, okay, so we're talking about long distance, perhaps cycling, okay, we can also look at marathon runners being prime candidates and examples, okay, to reduce that fatigue and increase, obviously, the energy production during their endurance activity. So we're looking at endurance sports specifically for EPO use. In terms of side effects, we're looking at this aspect of thickening of the blood, so the viscosity of the blood increases. Okay, if we think of blood as a liquid, okay, during this time, if we're taking EPO, it turns sludgy, turns into like a slush puppy if we think of an iced drink. Okay, and that in itself causes chances obviously of blood clots and an increase in stroke, as well as obviously heart attacks, because obviously ultimately the heart is working harder. On to diuretics next. Okay, so here we're looking at the aspect that this drug removes fluids from the body. Okay, they don't actually necessarily improve performance as such in terms of this drug. Ultimately, they do help the athlete lose body weight, and ultimately they also dilute the presence of illegal substances through the removal of urine. Again, pause the video here. Which athletes are going to require diuretics in their performance? And what are the health risks? Okay, so if we think of performers needing this type of drug, we're looking at reducing our body weight. So it could be, for example, boxers, it could be jockeys, okay, anyone that has to maybe play or perform in their sport and need to get into some sort of weight category. Some of the side effects, obviously, as we're reducing and removing some of that fluid, okay, it can create obviously dehydration, and ultimately, and if we're dehydrated, we're more likely to suffer with muscle cramps. Let's move on to beta blockers. Okay, so beta blockers basically help calm the performer. They help reduce the effects of adrenaline. And when we reduce our heart rate, when we reduce that muscle tension and the blood pressure, ultimately what we're doing there is we're helping our performance in things like fine skills, and obviously reducing aspects of nerves, because ultimately we're reducing that muscle tension. Okay. This type of drug can be prescribed by a medic at hospital, okay, but it's only able to be used by sporting performers if it's prescribed by a medic. Again, pause the video here. Which sports and which athletes might require beta blockers? And again, what are some of the health risks you think associated with beta blockers? Okay, so if we're talking about fine skills, we're talking about precise precision sports, okay, requiring things like accuracy. So archery would be a prime example, okay. Any type of shooting, so clay pigeon shooting, things like that. We might look at snooker players, okay, if we're looking at, for example, reducing their nerves, reducing muscle tension, and reducing the effects of adrenaline. Again, some of the side effects, it can cause nausea, so the feeling of, feeling sick ultimately can create obviously poor circulation, okay, around the body, which has problems in itself, because that also links into aspects of heart problems. And ultimately, with this type of drug, we're going to feel more tired and perhaps weaker. Okay, so why do performers take performance enhancing drugs? Okay, pause your video here, see if you can branch up 5 or 6 different reasons. Why do we take performance enhancing drugs? And also, why has there been an increase in performance enhancing drugs being taken, do we think, in the last 15 years? Okay, if we look at that second question first and foremost, we can see that actually there's more performance enhancing drugs nowadays, because ultimately there's this bigger demand to win, isn't there? There's greater financial incentives as well as media attention. So some of the advantages of taking drugs we could have mentioned. Okay, it keeps the performer from playing better and for longer. Obviously, it keeps them up with competition, because ultimately if they think other athletes are taking it, then it keeps them in competition. And it also increases the chances of income being dependent on performance. So if we finish first, second or third, we obviously get that financial reward. So we want to be in those medal positions. Ultimately increases our chances of success, that goes without saying, and ultimately increases the chances of fame and recognition. Okay, and performers generally just think it's a level playing field. Well, if that performer's taking drugs, I need to take drugs to keep up. Let's look at the disadvantages. So again, pause the video here. What are some of the risks? And how does taking performance enhancing drugs impact the spectators? Okay, first and foremost, let's look at the risks very quickly. Okay, so ultimately it's a form of cheating, it's immoral, and it's against sportsmanship. Okay, the testing is better, so it's more likely that they're going to get caught nowadays. Okay, and there's also a potential of bans and fines, which can deter athletes. Ultimately, it damages the reputation of yourself and also the sporting performer. And there's obviously health risks, as we've talked about. The second question we'll go through in class, okay, but think of the social impacts, okay, if we think of how society is influenced by positive role models or negative role models. And finally, for the practitioner, I'm not going to go through this in detail with you. You can have a read through that. But these are some of the teaching and learning strategies for this social cultural topic. Best of luck, folks.